Everyone, what is going on? What is going on? Welcome to That Man Show. Good evening to you. My name is Curtis Brooks. I am your host, executive coach and men's life coach, specializing in transformational leadership for men. Guys, we got a powerful show for you this evening. We're talking about father wounds, how sons can heal, forgive, and lead. This is going to be a powerful show, a powerful discussion because, after all, we're not talking about sons. We're talking about us men, and that includes myself. And we are the sons. We're the offspring from our parents, and in most cases, that is what we're dealing with. We're dealing with father wounds, and then I would even extend this conversation also for mothers, fathers, or excuse me, sons are dealing with mother wounds as well. And I was one of them as well at a time in my life. And so at some point, we're going to just dive into that conversation as well. Again, for now, we're talking about father wounds, how sons can heal, forgive, and lead. A powerful discussion. Once more, my name is Curtis Brooks. I am a executive coach and men's life coach here, specializing in transformational leadership for men. So on tonight, first we want to talk about the link, the Zoom link. I will put that in the chat here. Give me just a second here. I will put that in the chat. Make sure. There we go. Put the Zoom link here in the chat so that you can join the conversation here on Zoom. And we're also live here as well. So again, be a part of the conversation here in Zoom, and then from the Zoom app, you can also be here featured here on LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube through the platforms that we're streaming to. So once more, you can join the conversation. Hey, Dr. Anjan, thank you for joining, sir. Thank you. Absolutely. Yeah, a great subject. I'm looking forward to diving into this conversation for sure. Thank you for joining, man. It's been a long time since I've seen you online here, Dr. Anjan. And I'm talking to Dr. Anjan over on LinkedIn. And unfortunately, we cannot bring his comments up, but that's the way it is. Maybe one of these days we'll get that fixed. But again, thank you for Dr. Anjan for joining us. So we're talking about father wounds, how sons can heal, forgive, and lead. First, we want to determine what a wound is and just kind of come to a consensus on what a wound is. And commonly, we can say a wound, or we know a wound is a cut or abrasion or an incision that someone may have received, perhaps in surgery or just of the act of being careless or a fall or just, we know what a wound is. And it's a cut maybe that's open, perhaps, maybe. But there are those wounds that get to Grow Brunch. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I am on Dr. Anjan. I am also on Go Brunch as well. Haven't been over there in a while, other than the meetings with Margaret. Yeah. So, but yeah, I am also part of the Go Brunch as well. So that being said, we know that those wounds, though they can be external wounds, but we can also be dealing with the internal wounds, the emotional wounds, the psychological wounds. And a lot of times these psychological wounds, they come from our fathers. And fathers carry they play a major role in our lives. They do. And as a father, I know I play a major role in the lives of my children, and as a husband as well. But we're talking about fathers. So the reason why this is so important, because for each of us, especially for the sons, we're talking about the sons and the sons who become fathers themselves, or the son who later grows up to become a man, whether you're a father or not, it still applies. And so what happens a lot of times, we're dealing with the emotional pain left from the father wounds. The father is the foundation, and this is from a biblical perspective, and I, I think a lot of times you come online, you start talking about these biblical things, the biblical truths, and it's okay that people don't get them, but I would encourage you to hang in there, sit with the conversation, and just listen, and just sit with it for a while. But nevertheless, as fathers, we are the foundation of our household, and because the foundation oftentimes is doesn't understand the role, or men a lot of times as fathers, we don't understand the role that we play. And because oftentimes we don't understand the role that we play, we have a tendency to fall short. We end up playing other roles, so to speak, roles that are just contrary to what's what of knowing what a father is. And we end up in most cases playing the role that society has called us to play. And especially nowadays in the climate that we're in right now, it's men having to figure out if they're still men. And I'm just going to put that out there. That's just a reality that we're dealing with and in this world. And if the man does not know that he's a man, or hasn't come to a consensus that he is a man, it's very interesting how, and I kind of alluded to this last week, that if I were playing the devil, so to speak, or the enemy, so to speak, if I was playing this person, what I would do for men is to keep you distracted, to keep you so distracted that you would not know who you were, because you would be busy trying to figure out who you were, because you were obviously distracted. And so if I were playing an evil role, I would keep us as men distracted. I would use the women to play a major role, use the mothers also to play a major role, because oftentimes what happens when the sons, or when the mothers have issues with the fathers, the sons end up having issues with the fathers. And this is just a reality. There are some major wounds that we as fathers, we as sons have to deal with. And the absence of a father, oftentimes those wounds cut deep. They cut deep. And there are the formative years for a child, a young boy. And I'm sure there's, I think perhaps Dr. Anjan could answer that, but there are formative years for a young boy when the father is present. That is the best time. That's the best gap of time that the father needs to be there. And oftentimes the father is not there, not in all cases. And let's just face it, every person, or because I'm saying the father wounds, it does not mean that I'm speaking in general terms in the sense that there are many men out there who have had their fathers. And there are many more men who are without fathers, be it the father was present or the father was not present. But for the father that wasn't present and the father that was present but not present, those are the men that I'm talking to. And in some cases, even with the father being present, there are father wounds. And here's the interesting thing about father wounds. In most cases, the father himself, as a son, he was wounded. The son was wounded, much like we as the sons, we were wounded by our fathers. And it does not mean that every man was wounded by their father. I can't say that holistically. I can't say that, hey, this is a definite number, an accurate number of that every man was wounded by the father. I can't say that. But for the fathers who did not know how to be fathers to their sons. Yeah, absolutely, Dr. Anjan. Thank you for your comment. For the fathers did not know how to be fathers to their sons. There's a major chance that you were wounded. There's a major chance that you were wounded. And this wound comes, as I mentioned earlier, psychological. It's not necessarily the external wound, obviously the open wound that someone could see visibly. But what happens, we have the psychological wound that takes place. We have an inner wound that most people don't see, but it is there. And the offshoot of that inner wound being taken place, or that inner wound happening to the son, is that he moves on as an adult to build relationships from that same place. Now, I've talked about the importance of healing many, many different times throughout the different conversations I've had here on LinkedIn and other platforms. I've talked about the importance of men healing. And the healing obviously is not something that we're doing to ourselves, and obviously, but the healing comes from the fathers. And a lot of times when the fathers don't know how to become fathers. And let's face it, parenting is not easy. Parenting is not easy. And most of us as fathers, we know to do what we do, and that is to work and provide and take care of our households. And the other piece of it that I think oftentimes is neglected is that we fail to come into a understanding of who we are. Most of what we have come into, what we will come into, is what we're told of who we are. And out of that understanding, out of what's been given to us, we then begin to father our children as best as we know. And so for the father who is absent, or for the father who has abused his son or sons, the consequences are absolutely huge. They're absolutely massive, because as a kid I would skip rocks across the water in a kind of living in Chicago, or at least in the suburbs outside of Chicago. We'd find the little lakes and ponds and just grab rocks and, the perfect rock, kind of look for the perfect rock and skip them across the water. And I'm using this analogy because it's much like whether the father's absent, abusive, or the father was critical, or there was just a neglect on any level. What happens is that this rock, as a kid, I would skip these rocks across the water, and the rock was, hey, thank you, Marcia. The rock was just skipping across the water, and at the beginning of as this rock skipped across the water, the ripples were pronounced. You could see them, but as the ripples dissipated, obviously you couldn't see them. They weren't as pronounced. And this is the same way in regards to how us as sons are dealing with this perhaps neglect, being abused by our fathers, or if the father didn't show up, he was absent, or if the father was the absentee father, he showed up perhaps with gifts and presents and wanted to just shower us with gifts. The results in most cases were the same. And so here's the rippling effect that takes place. We show up in relationships wounded as men. We show up in relationships wounded as men. We show up also as wounded fathers, dealing with our kids. We show up as wounded husbands. And so when the son is healed, the father is healed. So that's why it's important to understand. That's why it's important to understand that the son, when he's wounded by the father, his recourse is what? Without the interruption on the path, on that straight path that he's going to be traveling, without any kind of interruption on that straight path that the son is traveling, he 99.9% of the time, he will continue traveling in that course, and he will travel in the way, in the manner that his father also led. And for some issues or situations, maybe some of us as men, that's the last thing in our mind is to want it to be like our fathers. That's the last thing in our mind. We're in some cases running away from that. But here's what's interesting about that is that you can't escape it. You can't escape it. And it doesn't mean that that's going to be something that you're going to have to deal with for the rest of your life. It doesn't mean that. But what it does mean is that before you come to a healthy place, you'll have to deal with the very thing that has become natural to you, because it's the very thing that you know, the template that you have seen. And whether the father has been there or the father is absent or is not participating at all or just not there, you as a father you as a young man will have to find your own way. So something, in some cases, some kind of template is better than nothing, perhaps. I didn't have a template as a young man. And so I've had to find my own way. It has absolutely been challenging trying to find my own way in this thing called life. But I tell you one thing, I would not give it up for the world. I would not give up all the lessons and all the things I've learned thus far. I would not give it up for the world. I would not trade it in for anything in this world. At all. It has been what I needed. It has been what I needed. And I think it is important for us to understand that hardship, challenges are absolutely a part of life. And we must be prepared to embrace them, whether you want to or not. They're going to embrace you. They're going to be a part of who we are. They're going to make us who we are. And I think as sons who are wounded by their fathers, we have to be prepared to. We have to be prepared to make sure that we're not carrying on that legacy of wounded sons. Because let's face it, it's not only the sons who are wounded, it's the father, it's the son it's the wounded son who becomes perhaps a father or husband. And let's just face it, you don't have to be a son. You don't have to be a father. You don't even have to be a husband. But the wounded son through no other recourse, he will ruin his relationship. He will wound his wife. He will wound his significant other. He will wound the children. That is the recourse, ladies and gentlemen. So it becomes absolutely essential for us as sons to do the work, to heal from the things that we've dealt with, the hand that we've been dealt. It becomes absolutely essential that we don't spill off, that our stuff is not spilling over and off into relationships. Because let's just face it, the healing, the unhealed son, and I know for a lot of us as men, we don't like to really talk about that healing piece of it. But it is a necessary, gentlemen. It is a necessary, and it's just the way it is. It's just a necessary. It's just not something that you're going to get around and you can dress it up by way of using different words. But the reality of it is that if you're bleeding out, man, and you have not repaired that cut, that wound, you're going to end up bleeding over into your different relationships with your children, relationship with your spouse, with your significant other. And these wounds that we have as sons, they absolutely affect every other relationship as a leader, guys. The things, the spillage, so to speak, it doesn't just stop at the issues that we've had with our parents or the issue you may have had with your father. They absolutely spill over into everything that you will touch will be affected by these relationships. And because they're affected by the wounds of the son, because when they're unhealed, as I just mentioned, they affect every other relationship that we are dealing with. And it just gets worse. So there has to be some kind of intervention, ladies and gentlemen. There absolutely has to be some kind of intervention in regards to us as sons healing. When there is not intervention, as men, what happens? We become very critical of even other men. We become very critical because when we don't have a respect for, as men, when we don't have a respect for our fathers, it's very, very difficult to have a level of respect for other men. And when we don't have a respect for other men, I'm talking about the sons who eventually become fathers. For the sons who don't respect their fathers, they become men, if not fathers, if not parents, they become grown men. And at some point, they don't respect other men. And if they don't respect other men, in most cases, they cannot respect authority. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is one of the biggest reasons, I think one of the biggest challenges that we as men are dealing with. Our reluctancy, not so much a reluctancy, but just the inhibitions that we have to respect authority. Because we have not had the we have not had the authority in our lives, or perhaps the authority was because perhaps the person who was represented a level of authority, they didn't show up in the proper way. So how do we as men show up respecting other men? We've got to deal with the unhealed wounds. We've got to forgive daddy. Because when we don't, this is just a big giant circle. And for a lot of us, we're wondering how we got here. For a lot of us, we're in disbelief of how our life is represented. When the son loses respect for the father, he becomes a grown man who does not respect other men. And I can say this, perhaps we can say, well, that isn't always the case. Let me explain. When the son does not respect his father, his level of respect for another man is always conditional. So there's some contingency, spoken or unspoken, that this son has in relationship, or this son who becomes a grown man at some point. There's in a conversation that he's having or he's had with himself in regards to, because what he then respects, he respects power. He respects men in position at times, but again, contingent or conditional on some level. So when the father is absent, when the father is abusive, when the father is distant, you've heard me speak about, and I think I may have mentioned this in the previous conversation, is that identity plays a major part in the wounds that the son has received from the father. And I think oftentimes we as sons, we don't realize or forget that our fathers were sons themselves. They were son and we of a father, which we know as grandfather or granddad or whatever the case might be. They were also a son. And so consequently, the son that we now know as our father, he was a son too. Perhaps in most cases, wounded also by his father. And because of the template that was designed for him, or not, or their lack of, he also began to work out of that information. He began to build off of the information or the mannerism or the examples or the experiences that were provided for him. As men, we can become, or sons who are wounded by the fathers, we can become very critical. Sons have also dealt with the abandonment. Now, these things I've shared with you, they are not an exhaustive list at any stretch of imagination. The list goes on in regards to what other sons are dealing with, have dealt with. And I mentioned abuse. I mentioned neglect. Some sons have dealt with fathers who are very critical, fathers who are very opinionated, fathers who are know-it-alls, fathers who don't give the sons an opportunity to speak or to share their opinion. Some fathers don't want to know what the son has to say about a particular issue. Some fathers are very strict on how they deal with certain things. Some fathers have not had the template themselves, and naturally, they've been in a place on having to try to learn themselves. And as a recourse, this is what we were given because our fathers didn't know themselves. There is an emotional impact on how the sons show up. And let me put this out here in a way that hopefully you'll understand. When I speak of sons, I'm not just speaking of someone who's, just perhaps a teenager, 17, 18. I'm speaking of sons in a sense of men who have not grown up, men who have not matured. And unfortunately, a lot of times we cannot, or it becomes very difficult to come to a level of maturity because of the unhealed wounds. Now, as I was preparing for this conversation, I thought about the word influence, like a person being under the influence of a drug or some kind of alcohol or something like that. And I also thought about how a person can be under the influence of their unhealed wounds. They can be under the influence of what their former experiences have been. Under the influence of the thing they have not healed from. And so naturally, if they are under the influence, because there are things here, I'll put it this way. There are things that you can expect a son to do because he does not know, or he's unaware of certain things due to immaturity or, just a host of different things. Due to he wasn't shown how to do something. He didn't have the example, or again, a lot of different things, different scenarios can be created out of that. But then there is also the son who grows up and matures. He becomes a father, not a man, but a father, because there are things that a father knows or that he's learned as a son, and now he, as the father, is walking in a level of maturity. The father does not continue to do the same things that the son has done due to different, just lack of knowledge and experience. The father doesn't continue to do those things. There's a scripture in the Bible that says, when I was a child, I spoke as a child, but when I became an adult, I put away childish things. So there's a mindset that was for the child, and then there's a mindset that is for the father. And at some point, the father puts away those things that the child used to do because he has matured. Now, as a father, he is coming from or communicates from a space of maturity. He communicates from a place of healing or being healed. He communicates from a place of love. He communicates from a place of understanding. It doesn't make the Father perfect, but he begins to give understanding. He begins to show up as understanding. He begins to show up as someone who's now learned rather than his former experiences. The Son does not have this luxury, because when young men or young boys who become men are still dealing with certain issues, they're still sons. They're still sons. Age-wise, they're grown men. But from a place of personal growth, spiritual growth, they're still sons, having to learn how to heal, having to forgive. And when the sons can mature and grow up as fathers and become fathers, they can eventually learn how to lead. And this is what a father does now. A father leads. Now, you'll hear me say, you may have heard me say this different times, and I'll continue to say this. Any parent, man or woman, who is raising children there's no difference between the individual who plays a leader or who takes upon a leadership role in an organization and the leadership role at home. I believe that with all my heart. Obviously, the titles and the roles may change. They are different. I believe the first business that we will take hold of or respond to or take part of is our family. Family is the first business for us as men, as sons, and eventually fathers. Your family is the first business that you will ever take care of. And when we have not learned how to take care as men, when we have not learned how to take care of our families and deal with the various attitudes, mentalities, emotions, and things of that nature, and I'll just kind of even share a personal story. I have a baby girl who's going to be 2 soon. And the flare up of emotions and the different things. And I'm like, oh God, at 1 year old, she has all these emotions. It's a lot. It's no different from what we deal with when we're working certain jobs, especially if you're a leader. The various just personalities that we're dealing with. The wives dealing with their husbands, the husbands dealing with their wives. Your first line of business for the husband or for the man or the woman, husband or wife, significant other, first line of business is leadership at home. Now, I often marvel at this. Thank you, Marcia. I have not. I don't know if I've. Is that a movie, Sins of the Father? I don't know if I've seen that before. I'm not sure if I've seen that before. But essentially, I like that. I like that title. But essentially, that is the premises of this conversation, and that if we as sons are not prepared, and I think that it's important that I think at sometimes the pain of the different experiences of broken relationships at times in life, if they're not signs and cues for us to say, wait a minute, something is not right, then I don't know what is. But oftentimes, guess what happens? We end up blaming the other person. If we have, as sons who are grown men, find ourselves going from one relationship to the next relationship, to the next relationship, to the next relationship, that something needs to be repaired. Not the external wound, but the internal wound needs to be healed. And not only that, from the son who becomes a father, he also becomes a teacher. The son becomes the father. The father is not only the father, but he is a teacher also. Even as a husband and a father, I minister to my wife all the time, as often as I can. And it doesn't mean that it doesn't mean that she's ready to receive everything all the time. But I also, as a father, I have to know creatively on how to say certain things. I have to be prepared to say those things out of love. Sons don't have this luxury. Fathers do. When the son heals, acknowledges first that there's pain. When the son first acknowledges that there's a situation that he's dealing with and have dealt with for an extended period of time, and is ready to shed that weight, shed that burden that he is dealing with, until the son recognizes that, he'll be forever walking in the shoes of his father. And in most cases, not willing to admit it. Because here's the reality. It's the only template that he has known. Or not, or their lack of. It's the template that he is working out of. Or if he has to find his own way. It's the template that he's working out of. It's the template that he was given. And this is not to say that fathers are horrible by any stretch of the imagination. That is not what I'm saying. I love being a father. I love being a husband. I love being a man. It doesn't make me perfect by any stretch of the imagination. But it does set me up to be prepared to learn. I too, as a son, have had to recognize my wounds. Recognize when I was hurt. Absolutely, Marcia. She says, and I'm looking at another screen here, guys. I apologize. She says, men should be willing to admit their brokenness from the wounds They should view themselves as broken vases that can be glued back together. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, and unfortunately, that's a great comment, Marcia. And unfortunately, a lot of times, men, we don't like to to deal with that reality. We don't like to hear the word brokenness, and I'm not saying that you're wrong. I agree with you, and I think there is a reality. We have to be able to admit that, hey, you know what, I'm broken, man. This thing, I want love. I want love. I want to be acknowledged, because I know there are a lot of great men out there. Absolutely, there's a lot of great men out there. But sometimes, because not sometimes, but a lot of times, 99%, 99.9% of the time, that goodness, that those great things that are in us, it becomes difficult for those things to materialize because of the unhealed wounds, because of our unwillingness to say, I'm broken, I'm hurt, I'm wounded. You can't walk into the love that you're expecting from another person. That spouse, your significant other, you can't even begin to receive that because of the unhealed wounds. This is one of my favorite conversations, and yes, I do get passionate about this conversation, because there's a saying that says you're shooting your foot off. You're shooting yourself in the foot. As men, that's what's happening. We're shooting ourselves in the foot. You can't graduate when you haven't passed the the first grade, the kindergarten. You can't go to the next level. Life is about levels. And many of us, not just with men, many of us are trying to get to level Z or whatever level, the 10th level, the 12th level. It doesn't matter what level. We're trying to advance in life without having to go through without having to deal with the feelings, the emotions. Absolutely. Marcia says, I'm looking at LinkedIn here, guys. So if you see me looking away from the screen here, I'm looking over here at LinkedIn. Marcia says, then again, God can use those wounds to minister to men who experience the same wounds and help them heal. Absolutely. The brotherhood in action, groups for young men, is necessary, especially now. Absolutely, absolutely. And absolutely. And I do believe every word you've said there, Marcia. I think that even the challenge, even though God and his just being amazing, he knows everything, and everywhere, all seeing, all knowing, his power, and he already knows that we're healed, that there are unhealed wounds. But I think the challenge is that we end up covering up from ourselves. It's not that, as you said, God already knows. But if we don't know, and it's not that we don't know, not in the sense that we're unaware of it, but to consistently cover up that thing or to not deal with it. And so here's the interesting thing about us as men, and this is just really people in general. When we're unwilling to deal with the things that we need to deal with as it relates to the unhealed wounds or unhealed areas, perhaps it's neglect, perhaps it's our father neglected us. We didn't grow up with our fathers. Perhaps, thank you, Fee. Good stuff. I appreciate that. Perhaps there's abuse. Perhaps our father was critical. Perhaps he just wasn't there at all, and we're having to figure this thing out ourselves. Again, there can be a multitude of different scenarios. Either way, regardless of what the scenario, regardless of what happened or how it played out, it will show up in our lives because the wounds are so deep. Sometimes it doesn't matter how we express ourselves in this. The wounds are so deep that they affect every area of our lives, and to include our financial status, to include our level of just how much money we can make, our success in life. I said earlier, when the son does not respect the father, the son becomes a man at some point. He in turn will disrespect other men. He in turn lacks the wherewithal to show or to have a respect not only for men, but to come under some level of authority. Because fathers help keep the sons in line. And I'm saying that purposely, in line. Because there has to be, or at least should be, discipline. And walking that straight, narrow line is a way of showing us as fathers, showing our sons that we love them. Because we know what's on the other side. We know what's on the other side, or what comes when we're walking outside of the line. I love what you said, Marcia, in regards to the wounds that when men are given these wounds, are the very wounds that men are dealing with. That God can heal those wounds. He can use those wounds for us to perhaps even come into ministry, communicating with other men, talking about these different hurts. And we don't have a whole lot more time, but I do want to put up a link here on screen here for those men who will watch the replay. Or if you are a woman who knows a man who could use some information, or who can use a free coaching session, strategies session with myself, there's a link on the screen, bit.ly/30-minute coaching. Again, this is a complimentary coaching session, and we can discuss some things that are on your mind as a man, and come to some kind of terms, and that if we're able to work together or not, that would be great. If not, that's okay too. There's countless of other men who are doing the same thing, but I have been in the trenches. I have been in the trenches, and I'm prepared to share my knowledge with you as a man, if you are so inclined to connect with me, and we can help you get through the things that you're challenged with and get on the other side of that. Because as I mentioned earlier, if we as men who are sons, who were once sons, but yet now men, if we're still dealing with that argument of spirit, that I'm not good enough, perhaps we're feeling inadequate about certain things. Perhaps we're not feeling that we're man enough in our household. And these are different things that show up. Because let's just face it again, if we have not, as men, if we have not had the template, we can show up as men. We can show up as passive men, not knowing our rightful places. Yes, I said rightful places. Yes, I did. Absolutely. I believe there's a rightful place for men and there's a rightful place for women. Absolutely. And for us as men, if we're consistently not showing up in that place, and when I say rightful place, let me clarify this. It's not putting our wives, our spouses, our significant other. It's not saying that they're underneath us or by any stretch of the imagination. That's not what I'm saying. I believe each of us, men and women, have distinctive roles. And before natural comes spiritual. And I think that we are trying to understand many of the natural things that we're dealing with. We're trying to understand spiritual things from a natural mindset. And through that natural mindset, it does absolutely house limitations. Unfortunately, that's just the way it is. And so for us men, if we find ourselves coming off as being passive men, there are a lot of men who are passive men. If we can find ourselves not feeling that we're heard, we're being heard, we're not speaking up, and oftentimes this comes from for us as men, this comes from being brought up in a household where mom was dominant, had a strong personality. So if you are a man who is dealing with that, again, absent father who was very critical. If you yourself as a son, not only as a son, but as a man now, if you yourself find yourself being critical of your spouse, critical of other men, if you find yourself being critical of other men, connect with me. Let's have a conversation. Because at the end of the day, I said earlier, if I was this evil person and had the power, I would keep men distracted. I would keep men unaware and unavailable to their identity, not knowing who they are. Because let's face it, when we know to have a good relationship with your father, and when you are aware of certain things that you have acquired from your father, certain knowledge, certain conversations that we've received from our fathers, certain conversations we've had over just different talks, or perhaps watching some kind of sports, baseball, football. For us as sons, those conversations absolutely stick with us. We remember those conversations. My dad said this, my father told me this, and things of that nature. But now, as sons who eventually become men, perhaps that was not your scenario, and you're trying to figure it out all by yourself, trying to make sense of it. You've got your own children to raise now. You're a father. You need to expose your children to a better version of yourself. I've had to learn how to. Doesn't mean that I'm perfect. Absolutely not. Doesn't mean that I don't make mistakes. This identity thing that I discussed, I think on last week, is a huge piece, because it's something about knowing who your father is. It's something about being able to identify who your father is, with who your father is. Being able to identify an image of your father that you can respect. A likeness in your father that becomes awareness. Is something about that. Because through understanding, we naturally emulate after our father. So if you are a man who has dealt with multiple challenges, perhaps you're in leadership. Yes, leaders too. If you're a husband, a father who is dealing with the lack of confidence in this area, this is not about blaming our fathers. This is about us as men picking up the pieces. About us as men picking up the leftovers. Because at some point, that's what we're dealing with. We have to be prepared as men to deal with the things that are been placed in our lap. Not time and time again that we're projecting our stuff onto people, onto our wives, onto our subordinates, as a leader perhaps, on our jobs, respective job. We're not burdening our subordinates with the lack of discipline that we haven't had, or the discipline, I should say, that we haven't had. We're not placing that burden on our spouses, our subordinates, our children. We're prepared to get it right. So as I mentioned, there's a link on the screen that's going to allow you to meet with me for 30 minutes, a strategy call. It is complimentary. The link on the screen is bit.ly/free 30-minute coaching. And obviously, again, you will meet with myself and we can figure out some things and figure out if we're a good match for each other. We can get to the bottom of what you're dealing with. And I guarantee you that once we are finished, perhaps you decide you want to work with me, that when you're finished, you're going to be more confident. You're going to be more confident, prepared to walk in that confidence that in so many ways that's been missing. So I want to say thank you for all of you who have participated in this conversation. Thank you, Dr. Anjan. Appreciate you. Again, as I mentioned, it's absolutely been nice to see you, Dr. Anjan, being part of the stream. I haven't seen you in a long time, man. And Marcia, thank you for joining. You've always been just a great supporter, a great addition to what we've been talking about, and great comments. Thank you, Dr. Marcia, or Marcia. I'm not sure if it's doctor, but there's another Dr. Marcia. But in any event, thank you, Marcia, for being part of the conversation, and all those who on LinkedIn who have been part of the conversation, who will watch the replay. Thank you, Fee, over on Facebook, for being part of the conversation. I do these conversations each week, every Thursday on LinkedIn, and we're sharing the broadcast out to LinkedIn, obviously, and over to Facebook and my YouTube channel. So then there's also a link that I place within the I think it just placed it over on LinkedIn. Should have placed it elsewhere. But nevertheless, there's also a Zoom link that is available that you can join me on. Yes, thank you, Marcia. There's also a Zoom link that you can join me here within the broadcast here, and become part of the conversation and share your thoughts and let other people know that you've got. You got an opinion about this, and we want to hear what you have to say as well. So again, thank you all for being a part of this conversation, and we will be back next week. And matter of fact, I'll give you a heads up on the conversation next week. We're going to be talking about when sons are wounded by their mothers. Yes, it happens, and I'll give you some more of my personal stuff and as well in relationship to that conversation. So when sons have been wounded by their mothers, and again, doesn't mean that our mothers are bad people. It's just that there's sometimes that there are needs that the children have, and then sometimes life keeps our parents busy, keeps our parents preoccupied with stuff, as life at times keeps us preoccupied with stuff. And I think we can find ourselves being spread so thin at different times in life, and to include our parents being spread so thin, and we end up neglecting the children, the sons and the daughters, unfortunately. Yeah, 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 absolutely. Mama's boy. Yeah, 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 definitely. I thought about that as well. So yeah, I'm going to play around with that and see kind of in what direction I want to go with that. But I might stick with the wounds of a mother. But yeah, that's definitely another good conversation. That's actually a separate conversation as well. I got the from Marcia over on LinkedIn here. I'm just kind of want to make sure that others are privy to this conversation. She says, "Yikes, that should be good." And then she says, "No, mama's boy." Yeah, yeah. That's there are the mother wounds, and then there is the mama boys, and so those I think perhaps maybe one and the same, but then at the same time, I think they're two separate conversations. So yeah, I would love to tackle that as well. And maybe you can come on, Marcia, if you want to be a part of that conversation with me and have that conversation. I would love for you to be, if you're so inclined to, let's, DM me if you want to be a part of that conversation, the mama's boy conversation, or if you want to be part of the conversation in regards to the mother wounds. I would love to have you on with me, and we can chat about it. And so that being said, again, thank you all. Thank you, Marcia, for your comments. And so just really quick, Marcia, I wanted to let you know that you're absolutely welcome to any of these conversations I'm having here. So this is just from your previous or your earlier comments. Yes, women are also can be a part of these conversations, and I think there's a lot to learn. There's a lot to learn. So, and yeah, I can learn too, for sure. Absolutely. So again, thank you all, Marcia. Thank you, Dr. Anjan, and all those who will watch the replay. Thank you, Fee, over on Facebook, and all those who will watch replay and for YouTube as well. I want to say again, I'm going to say bye-bye for now. And next week, look out for our discussion that is going to be, a matter of fact, make sure you share this conversation out if you haven't already. I haven't looked at all the comments over on LinkedIn, but if you haven't already shared this out, be it Facebook, LinkedIn, or YouTube, share this conversation out, guys. It's not to be a damning conversation for any of us as men, but a conversation that sets free. We have to live with the wounded. Yeah, we do have to. We have to live with the wounded. We do, but I think that's a decision that people make. This is what Marcia is saying. Her comment is over on LinkedIn is, we have to live with the wounded. We do. But I think out of love, the father and also the mother, and I say the mother, the young girl who's a daughter who becomes a mother, not a mother in the sense of that she has children, but a mother in the sense of maturity, and a father in the sense of coming into a level of maturity. We also have to become the teachers. And I think that's a challenge a lot of times for us as people. We enter into relationships oftentimes. We want to believe that the man should have it all together. No, he doesn't. And the man wants to believe that the woman should have it all together. No, she doesn't. In most cases, the man and the woman are entering the relationship as wounded people. In most cases, not in all cases, can't definitively say all cases, but in most cases, the men and women both are entering into the relationship as wounded people. And there are a lot of times we don't see those wounds. And I'm going to step out on a limb, and I know it to be true, that there are a lot of times that the person that we have agreed to enter into a relationship with, there are a lot of times they don't even know that the wound is there. There's something about entering into a relationship with a person that we find out our stuff about ourselves looking through the eyes of another person. And a lot of times it's very difficult to find those things that are broken with us, to find those things that are that have been wounded as a child, even as a child. A lot of times the things that show up, they don't show up until the person, our spouse or the person, our significant other in a relationship. A lot of times those things don't show up until that person says something. And we may not know that the wound is there. And now it's open, but we perhaps in some cases may have been covering it up for so long, to the point that we have deceived ourselves. The Bible speaks of a person deceiving themselves. So it takes relationships. It takes persons having having varying opinions on matters for us to heal, and for us to see ourselves. Marcia, you are asking some great questions, or putting out some great content out there. She says, this is over on LinkedIn, guys, here. So I'm looking at my other screen here. So Marcia says the triggers for the wounded comes out of left field. And when we find out, it's a big surprise. We can choose to stay or go based on the maturity of both parties. Absolutely. Absolutely. I love what you said there, Marcia, in regards to that they come out in left field. Absolutely. Yeah. And a lot of times we don't know those wounds are there. Yeah, they absolutely appear to come out of left field. I myself have experienced that. And the interesting thing about that, I think a lot of times, I think when God provides us in relationships that provide peace, a lot of our stuff does not come out in the midst of those survival type relationships. We don't see a lot of our stuff in those survival relationships, because sometimes we've entered into those survival style relationships, or they become those survival kind of relationships, or at least what I like to call those survival relationships. And then unfortunately, a lot of times we re-enter those, even maybe perhaps after a breakup, we re-enter those survival style relationships. And as long as we are in those survival style kind of relationships, we don't see our stuff. And I believe that when God provides peace in relationships, a level of peace, that's when we begin to start to see our stuff. Then we can become honest with ourselves, or our spouse or significant other can become honest with us, or we can have those conversations, have those different conversations where we can begin to speak honestly. And when we start to speak honestly through a space of peace, it can seem like all hell is breaking loose, but when in fact, it's exactly what is ordered, what is needed. It's exactly what is needed. So, yeah, I absolutely love what you said there, Marcia, and that the triggers or the different conversations can appear that they come out a left field. But in fact, sometimes the people are, they're just been ordered to say that by some higher power, perhaps, but, God he uses people to heal us. He uses people to heal us. And so a lot of times we try to avoid these conversations, and they're needed to go to that next level. They're needed to get into, to walk in, to really finally discover what love is about, the unconditional love of God. So getting to those healing places are absolutely needed, and we must have those conversations in order to find or discover what love is truly about, the unconditional love that God has for all of us. Unfortunately, we cannot get to that healthy place if we have not healed, because in fact we're under the influence of something else. We're under the influence of the past experiences, abuse, the neglect, the father who was very critical, the father who was very strict. We can be under the influence of those things, under the influence of the wounds, the pain that was there. And so it can absolutely be very difficult to receive the unconditional love of a father if we're still operating from a place as a son. Because as I mentioned, the son does some, just as sons, we do some really silly things as sons, just some unlearned things. We just do some silly things as sons. But when we become fathers, we put away the childish things and begin to walk in the headship of fathers and of leaders, and become great leaders, great husbands and fathers to our children, and begin to minister to our wives, and just a slew of wonderful things that are opportunities that are open for us when we are walking in the headship of a father, rather than being under the influence of our past hurts and wounds that are still open. So, Marcia, I am going to let you go, and please don't hesitate to, again, reach out to me, and let's have a discussion if you'd like to, share a conversation on these different things that we're talking about. I'd love to hear your thoughts and your opinions on that. And so I'm going to say good night, everyone. Again, thank you, Marcia, for your interaction in the comments area, and for all those who will watch the replay, and the other people who are on Facebook and also on YouTube. Again, thank you, guys. We're going to say ciao for now. As I mentioned here, one last thing here, link on the screen here. Reach out to me if you are so inclined, as a man or as a woman, your husband perhaps, or brother or son or nephew or an uncle who needs this information here as it relates to healing those wounds that we've all on some level received from our fathers, knowingly or unknowingly. Reach out to me on the link on the screen, bit.ly/free 30-minute coaching for a complimentary coaching session. So with that being said, we'll say ciao for now, and we'll talk with you soon. Bye-bye.